G'day everyone and welcome back to another Q&A video, this time for 30,000 subscribers. So as always, a massive thank you to everyone for your support. We obviously wouldn't be here without it. I do read every single comment that you leave me, even if I don't have the time to respond, so please keep them coming, except the spam comments. We could do without those. I don't know if you can hear the lorikeets in the background, but if you can, apologies, I can't do very much about them. But hopefully add some ambient background noise. Now for this video, I was actually hoping to do a Reddit AMA for something a bit different, but for some reason the mods on Melbourne haven't got back to me in a couple of weeks, so I haven't been able to do it. Hopefully I do hear back soon, and maybe it'll be ready in the future, and I can do that on Melbourne. But we'll see. So without further ado, here are your questions for 30,000 subscribers. First question is from Baku, and they were asking about my worst performing video, which was it's called the Khaki election. They found this a bit sad, as they did enjoy it, and yeah, I did too. Would you still consider doing other videos like this in the future? Thanks. As I said, you're right, it is my worst performing video, other than some of the shorts, and actually I think the shorts are all now doing better than this video. I think it's only got 1,500 views or something, but it is an interesting topic. Basically, if you haven't seen it, it's about how Australia managed to run a successful federal election in the middle of the Second World War, which I think is quite an amazing achievement, especially considering most countries, even democratic countries, didn't hold elections during the wartime period. They suspended them or for other reasons didn't hold them. So we are one of the few countries that managed to pull it off, and obviously getting servicemen and women across the world to vote in an election like this is an amazing achievement. You had electoral officers literally taking boats out to random islands in the Pacific to make sure that outposts of soldiers could vote. And then they had to bring the ballots back thousands and thousands of kilometers, and the logistics of it and everything is really interesting. So if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link up here in the top right-hand corner and in the description below. But to come back to the question, yes, I absolutely would love to. The reason I haven't done more of those videos is pretty simple. I've got lots and lots of scripts that I haven't filmed yet. But like I said, I do find that a very good topic, and I will come back to that I guess, period in history and make some more videos about it. I've got some other, I guess, ideas on other topics to cover, but if you've got any, please let me know, and I'd happily go into it. The second question is from Madza Adza. I hope I've got that right. And they're asking about an unused railway siding or goods siding in Yarraville. And the question is, do you know anything about who mostly used it and whether it used to go down to Somerville Road to the Maribyrnong River dockside? It's a great question. I'll admit I didn't know this off the top of my head, but I have seen these sidings and walked on them. I can't find an exact opening date, but the siding that ran along the down platform was opened in the early 1880s. There were more added in 1893 to 94, and would probably have serviced the nearby commercial and light industrial area, which is sort of still there, but would have been much more extensive at the time. They were used right up until 1969 and then converted into a car park in the late 1990s. And today they're kind of a grassy park kind of area and not a car park anymore. That's all the information I could find overall, but if you are after more information, I'd recommend checking out the VicSig website for Yarraville Station or the listing on the Victorian Heritage Register, and I will link both of those as well in the video description below. The third question is from Pytho. If you could make one change, add or remove a bus to Melbourne's bus network to make it better, what would it be? It's a very good question. If I had to pick one thing, I would probably come back to the smart bus network, and particularly the Orbital smart bus routes, and upgrading those. So if you're not familiar with them, basically we have 3 Orbital smart bus routes which don't go in or out of the CBD, they go around the suburbs, as their name suggests. 901, 902, 903. They're very long routes, but they're very, very successful and always show up as some of the most productive and well-used routes in the state. So I would look at upgrading those. There was also, but because, for example, on weekends, they're running every 30 minutes. And if you've ever taken a bus between, say you've taken the 902 from Springvale, you know how well used it is, or the 903 between Box Hill and Doncaster. They get very busy on weekends. So I definitely think that The frequency could be upgraded, weekdays as well, outside of peak times. The other thing there as well is the 904 smart bus, which was never implemented. So at the time when the program was being planned, there was another more inner orbital bus called the 904, or the Blue Orbital, which I think was going to go from Sandringham to Williamstown, if I remember correctly. And the reason why I nominate this is because it would have filled in a lot of gaps that we still have in our public transport network. It would have linked together a whole bunch of other routes and filled in bits that don't currently have a service and create some connections, which is basically what the smart buses were designed to do, and what the 902, 903 and 901 ended up doing in many cases, was replacing or upgrading an existing route and connecting them together. So I think the 904 would be a very well used route if it was introduced today. So that would be my nominations, I guess. There are many others, but maybe we can talk about them in another video in the future. Next question is from Cockatoo Transit, which, by the way, is a great channel. You should check it out if you haven't already. This question is about the future of Melbourne's old circumferential rail corridors in the context of the suburban rail loop. And the question is, has this opinion changed over time for you on, I guess, their usefulness? So I think we have to, as usual, go back to the history of our orbital railways a little bit. So things like the outer circle line, and I guess to a certain extent the inner circle line, but not really. And a lot of the country network in Victoria was built as speculative property investment, essentially. And at the time, there was a lot of, let's say, dubious links between the people making decisions about where railways were built and who happened to own property in the areas where these railways were built. Let's put it that way. This is definitely a topic for another video, by the way, but let's just leave it at that for now. So the suburban rail loop, on the other hand, is being built in completely built up areas right now. They're suburban, but they are built up areas, and they are providing those different sections of the suburban rail loop are providing new links where none currently exist, or they exist to such an extent that they take so long that they're not really practical to use, or you have to connect several bus routes or something like that. So I think while they are similar in typology in terms of the railways are going in a orbital manner around a city instead of going in and out, the way that they've come about and the places they're going and the intended functionality of them is quite different. So I don't think my opinion has changed to answer the question specifically, because, as I said, they are fundamentally different things. It's a good question. So the next one is from Hadsp Media. What's your favorite current or recent transport project, and why? I've got two kind of answers to this. One is for Australia and one is internationally. So for Australia, I think, I can't nominate a favourite, but there are a couple. Sydney Metro is a brilliant project. And even as a Melburnian, I have to say the quality of the project that's gone on up there has been very high. I've heard a lot of good things about it. I've used it myself, although not the newly opened bit. I've used the bit between Chatswood, up to Chatswood. But I was very impressed with it. And again, from what I can see, it's very good. They've got 3-minute frequencies. The station infrastructure is very good. The patronage is through the roof and people are really, really getting on board with it, so to speak. And that's always the best indicator of the usefulness of a public transport system or a route, is how many people are using it. And Sydney Metro has definitely satisfied that requirement. By the same token, Melbourne Metro for us down here will be a game changer, but for different reasons. If you haven't seen Tadeset's video on the Melbourne versus Sydney Metro question, not as a competition, but as a difference in what types of projects they are, definitely have a look at it because it does a really good job at explaining that and going into the details on both. So I will link that as well. So Melbourne Metro, again, for different reasons, will be a significant improvement for us and will allow a lot of other improvements to take place. So that'll be fantastic. Really looking forward to that opening, hopefully later this year. In terms of international projects, because I wanted to touch on this as well, because there's a lot of stuff going on outside of Australia, funnily enough. one that I've been looking at for a while is the metro in Thessaloniki in Greece, which, as I said, I've been keeping an eye on it for many years since it was first proposed. It was, planned many, many years ago by a former mayor who's no longer mayor anymore, but it's just recently opened. And it's the, I guess, first new modern metro system in Greece. You do have the Athens metro, but a lot of that is built on the original metro system from, decades and decades ago, I think well over 100 years ago. And it's kind of this connection of existing railways and new bits. And there are new lines on the Athens metro, true, but it's kind of similar to the London Underground, where you've got some brand new lines like the Elizabeth line or the Jubilee line, but they also used existing railways, or there are older bits of the system like the Northern line or whatever. So the Thessaloniki metro is completely new, and they've built 2 lines with plans for a third. They're driverless trains, and it's a real achievement for Greece to build something like this in a city like Thessaloniki, because like I said, it's only the second metro system in Greece, and it's brand new. Next question is from Faded Plogger. What were the abandoned platforms at Flinders Street used for? Now, there are several answers to this question, because there are a couple of abandoned or disused platforms or former platforms at Flinders Street. So we'll start with the platforms which are currently used for Arbory, the restaurant, which are right next to the Yarra River. So they were used for the former St Kilda and Port Melbourne railway lines. They used to go out of Flinders Street onto the Sandridge Rail Bridge across the river and then branch off towards St Kilda and Port Melbourne. So that's what happened to those platforms, and that's what they were used for, sorry. Another abandoned, disused platform is the very end, the east end of what is Platform 1 today. It used to be called Platform 14. Today it seems to be called Emergency Egress only, or Emergency Access only. I think it says Egress, which I thought was a bit strange. Prior to that, it's kind of linked to the former Prince's Bridge station, which was on the other side of what is today Federation Square and sort of underneath it. And that was a completely separate station that was right next to Flinders Street that serviced, I think, just the Epping and Hurstbridge lines, and the trains would terminate there. And then over time, when Prince's Bridge Station was closed, it was kind of amalgamated into Flinders Street a little bit. And if you come through on the Mernda or Hurstbridge lines today, you can see some bits and pieces around from, remnants of Prince's Bridge Station, but most of it's not there anymore. So that's that end of Flinders Street. If you go all the way to the other end as well, the other end of Platform 1, there's also a little dead-end goods siding, which is disused except for storing milk crates and benches, it seems, from by metro trains. I don't know why. But that was a former goods siding. And I think there's a plaque on Flinders Street that describes it as a former milk float area or milk goods area. I think, I could be wrong, but that seems to be what it was used for. But that's another disused / abandoned platform at Flinders Street. So hopefully that's answered your question. The next one's from Brooklyn Keynes, or Keynes. What is your favourite Melbourne suburban train? And congratulations on 30K. Thank you. But what's your favourite Melbourne suburban train? A Comenge, Siemens, Extrapolis, or HCMT? Look, okay, as a Gunzel, I have to say, from that perspective, a Comenge, it's the oldest train. It's got very distinctive noises and a look and feel about it that's very nostalgic. It's got, the brake pad smell that really gives the City Loop that distinctive feel, I think, and we'll miss that when it's gone. On the other hand, they are old trains. They are getting hard to maintain. There are bits that are going wrong with them, and you can see that when you look at them or on them. So in terms of a passenger, I would say the HCMT trains. It took me a while to warm up to them, like the E-Class trams, but now that I have, I think they provide a really nice experience. They're very smooth. The walk-through carriages are definitely handy. And like I said, it feels like one long thing, and you can, really walk from one end to the other. You could probably play tennis in between the two things if you wanted to, in between the two carriages. Not that I would recommend doing that, but you probably could in theory. There are obviously problems with them as well. The audio is awful, the audio announcement quality. I don't know how we managed to wreck them in however many years.
Thank you for travelling with us this Monday afternoon, everyone. I want to wish you all a very pleasant today.
And of course, the door buttons are still a problem and haven't been fixed. But overall, I'd say those. Before the HCMTs came along, the Siemens trains were very close second behind them. again, because of the ride quality. However, I can never forgive the Siemens trains for only having 2 doors. I don't know how we made the same mistake twice after the Z1 and 2 class trams when we had 2 doors, and then we learned, oh, actually we should have 3 doors instead of 2 wider doors because it's much more efficient. But then we decided to make the same mistake with the Siemens trains. But other than that, they're also nice trains. But like I said, ComEng and HCMTs, if I had to pick, would be top of the list. Next question, where is request stopping warranted and how should it be implemented? Interesting question. If you're not aware of what a request stop is, it's basically where a train is requested by a passenger to stop if you're on the train or to stop if you're on the platform. And this can be done in many different ways. If you're on the platform, you might hold out a flag or make a call or press a button or something to request that the train will stop. Otherwise, it will not stop. So similar to how you might hail a bus or a tram, is that you have to specifically request that it stops, otherwise the train will keep going. And if you're on the train, you might, usually the system would be you just tell the conductor where you're getting off, and then they'll tell the driver. In terms of how it should be implemented, look, we don't have any left in Victoria. There are still a couple left around Australia, I think mainly in New South Wales and Queensland, and someone will know where they are. I think Heathcote Junction was the last one in Victoria, but again, someone will correct me if I'm wrong. I think given the extent of our rail network now, I struggle to think of a scenario where they are warranted. They are useful, but only for very specific circumstances. And now that we've basically closed all of the, random branch lines out to towns of like 50 people, where a request stop would probably be useful because, unless the entire town is using the train every day or something, the train doesn't need to stop there every single trip. Now they're servicing towns or cities with thousands and thousands of people, or stations where people are getting there from surrounding areas. So I think given the current context of Victoria's railways, there's really no use for them. There may be in other places a specific use case, but like I said, they're very, very specific circumstances. And how it should be implemented, look, I don't think it really matters. I mean, a flag is probably fine. I mean, in this day and age when the train's going 130 kilometers per hour, that's probably not going to stop the training time. But potentially some sort of request button or, you call or something, not really sure. But like I said, they wouldn't really be used in many places anyway. Next question is from Cody. Congratulations on 30K. Thank you again. I really enjoyed the collaboration you did with Tate Set where you ranked the classes of Melbourne's trams. Do you have any similar videos in the works or planned? Short answer is yes, we do. And watch this space. I won't spoil anything on the topic, but we have been talking about it. We also enjoyed doing the video and it looks like we got some really good feedback too. So definitely on the cards and planning ahead. Next question is from Max Production 16. What has been your hardest video to research and how do you find or choose historical topics to talk about? Look, it's a really good question. To answer generally, the hardest videos that I make are ones that are on topics that are actually more recent. The reason for this is copyright, put simply, because things like newspapers, digital newspapers, haven't been put into places like Trove, and they're only available on other archiving websites which are nowhere near as easy to navigate or find stuff. So often I will have to physically go somewhere to a library or public records office or state library multiple times to find something in particular, and that involves going through paper records, which takes a lot longer than a digital search. Even though it is really cool handling paper records and I love it and nothing will ever replace it, it is genuinely a lot quicker to find stuff if you're just typing something into a search bar. So I guess from that end, the Melbourne Museum video was probably the one that took me the longest for the length of the video. I had to go to, like I said, because all those things really happened in more recent times and I had to spend a lot of time going through more recent newspapers to find things out. I also wasn't really that familiar with the background of the topic either, so I had to start, at a quite basic level and understanding all the different things. Plus, it was also very confusing because there were so many proposals and plans and ministers and speeches and things that were kind of buried that I had to come across basically. It took a very long time. It took me I think it took me months actually to finish that script. Hopefully it was worth it. Hopefully you enjoyed it, but that was the hardest one to research. And in terms of how I find topics, there's kind of three main sources. One of them is suggestions from all of you, which again, I'm very grateful for, and thank you for people who've suggested them. Second one is just things that I'm interested in and or just see walking around. Recently I was on, I think it's Beckett Street, and saw a plaque on a building that talked about this was where the inventor of the refrigerator was, lived or made the refrigerator or invented the refrigerator, which is something I have yet to look into, but that sounds interesting. So that's one source. And the third source is kind of by accident. And this is where a lot of the topics have actually come from. I'll be researching one topic and then I'll notice on the next page of the newspaper, there's some really weird or interesting or kind of mysterious thing that's alluding to some other event that I have to look into, and then I end up discovering something. A lot of videos have come around about that way, like the hook turns video, where I came across the origins of the hook turn completely by mistake when I was looking in another newspaper and saw a report by a minister on visiting Sydney and being amazed that they got rid of hook turns. So that was a good one to find. But they're my three main sources, basically. The next one is from Roy Winslow, 4491. This one is about how much of the green belt in the eastern suburbs remains today and what protections are in place, particularly around Ringwood. So the green belt, I think it was originally called the green belt and then was rebranded as green wedges in Melbourne 2030. Basically 5, I think, areas which were to be reserved from development around the outskirts of Melbourne. So you couldn't build there, except in very specific circumstances. Now, to answer the question, to a large extent, they are still there. There have been some changes made to the planning rules that allow some development to happen there. So, yeah, there are little encroachments, I guess, into the green wedges, but by and large, they are still there. And if you look at Melbourne on a satellite image map from this year or recently, you will be able to see pretty clearly where those green wedges are. So particularly the one around Ringwood, actually the one to the north, is pretty much the same as it would have been decades ago. So that's still there. Who knows where we'll be in another 50 years, but for now they are there. The next one is from Luke Arthur 1464. What are some of your favourite natural features of Victoria, like Dandenong Creek or Mount Alexander? Great question. I really love the Dandenong and Yarra ranges. It's whenever I go traveling, it's the thing that I miss the most is going through like Sherbrooke Forest or the creeks around there, Sassafras Creek or something, because it's a truly unique landscape that you do not find anywhere else. The ferns, the wildlife, the amazing trees, the climate and the topography, it's incredible. And it's even more incredible that it is that close to the city, and you can even catch an electric train there as part of the suburban network and then catch a bus if you want to go even further to Gembrook or something. And then beyond that, there's just endless wilderness all the way down to Gippsland, Great Dividing Range, all the way up to Bright and into New South Wales. So the whole area from basically Belgrave east, northeast is probably my favourite, but if I had to narrow it down, the Yarra Dandenong Ranges would be. And there are many other beautiful places around as well. The Ovens River around Bright and Wangaratta, absolutely fantastic. Mount Feathertop, the Alps up that way. And I know you said a favourite, but I've got to pick 3. The other one is, I guess, the Limestone Coast past the Great Ocean Road going into South Australia, which again is cheating a little bit because it's mostly in South Australia. But I love that scenery, the rocky cliffs against the Southern Ocean where you can look out to sea and just kind of imagine that there's nothing between you and Antarctica for thousands of kilometres, which is a pretty interesting thought when you stand there and see it, especially in the middle of winter. It really feels like there isn't. So if I had to pick 3, they would be my favourite natural features of Victoria. There are many, many others, of course, and many I haven't been to yet. So maybe ask me in a few years and I might have a different answer. So that's all for today. Again, a massive thank you to everyone for submitting your questions. And also a huge thank you to all my supporters who signed up over on the supporters portal. I think we've nearly reached 100, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. It really, really helps me out. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.